pregnant wife was declared mentally unfit by Millionaire and Mistress until the judge read her diary. A hushed courtroom. A trembling, pregnant woman stands at the center, gaze darting between the wealthy husband she once adored and the immaculately dressed mistress who's come to replace her. Whispers ripple through the gallery as the judge carefully lifts a small, tattered book from the evidence table. The diary's yellowed pages bear the secrets that could alter the destinies of everyone in this room. This is the story of how one woman's world unraveled under the weight of lies, greed, and betrayal, and how, in one unexpected moment, her written words toppled an empire built on deceit. Prepare for the unthinkable. Catherine Clark was born in the leafy suburbs of Bethesda, Maryland, in a modest brick house on Peachtree Road. She grew up in a world that moved at a gentle, predictable pace. Her parents, Ernest and Margaret Clark, were both high school teachers. Neither possessed great wealth nor any thirst for it. Love and knowledge were the only riches they cultivated. Their only child, Catherine, was quiet by nature, drawn to daydreaming and devouring novels in her favorite reading nook by the window. From a young age, Catherine's curiosity set her apart. She grew into a contemplative teenager, often found scribbling her thoughts in diaries. She had a gift for empathy. If a friend or neighbor were upset, Catherine was the first to reach out with kind words or a warm hug. She discovered early on that journaling was her lifeline, her way of figuring out a complex world. She recorded everything. The small joys, the hidden anxieties, and eventually the blossoming hopes of what her future might hold. At 19, Catherine faced a heartbreak that rocked her faith in relationships. Her first love, a fellow student named Peter Driscoll, moved away abruptly after his family decided to relocate to London. In the aftermath, Catherine found solace in words rather than people. This heartbreak, however, shaped her spirit. She vowed to protect her gentle heart by choosing her partners carefully, believing love was not something to be thrown about carelessly. Still, Catherine remained open to possibility. A dreamer, she was rarely cynical. She cultivated her talent for writing, studying journalism at Georgetown University, where she excelled in her classes and landed a sought-after internship at the Washington Post. It was here that she first brushed shoulders with power and prestige. She interviewed politicians, corporate magnates, and local celebrities. She also heard her share of heartbreak stories from everyday people trying to make a life in the bustling capital. Though Catherine found purpose in journalism, she also hungered for a deeper companionship. She wanted what her parents had, a stable, loving marriage built on mutual respect. Whenever Catherine visited them in her childhood home, she saw her father bring her mother a new library book every weekend, a small gesture that signified devotion. Catherine believed there was someone out there who would cherish her in that same tender way, yet fate rarely fits our expectations. Catherine's path to love would be far more turbulent and undeniably more dramatic than she could ever imagine. She had no inkling that her diaries would one day decide the outcome of a vicious legal battle that threatened her sanity, her family, and the life growing inside her. Charles Harrington was not a man who went unnoticed. Tall, with a commanding presence and a taste for expensive tailored suits, he strolled the corridors of influence as if he owned them all. In many ways, he did. The Harrington family was known for controlling a conglomerate of industries: real estate, tech startups, import-export, and Charles was its heir. Though not as publicly famous as tech giants like Elon Musk or Bill Gates, the Harrington name carried weight in financial circles across the country. Charles's father, Richard Harrington, once dined with Warren Buffett and cut deals with corporate titans. Charles had been groomed from childhood to inherit the family empire. After earning an MBA from Harvard, Charles threw himself into building an international reputation for Harrington Holdings. By the time he reached his early 30s, he had developed a string of successful acquisitions that boosted the family fortune to staggering new heights. But where Catherine had grown up with love as her foundation, Charles had grown up amid strategy and competition. Expressions of love within the Harrington family were measured out as carefully as the numbers on a balance sheet. He learned early that weakness was not tolerated, and caring too openly might be mistaken for vulnerability. He saw relationships as transactional beneficial only insofar as they served his ambitions. Fate drew them together at a philanthropy gala in Washington, D.C. Catherine had been invited to cover the event for a feature in the Washington Post. Charles, naturally, was one of the major donors headlining the evening. The moment their eyes met, Catherine would scribble about in her journal that same night it felt electric. Something in his polished demeanor and confidence intrigued her. For Charles, Catherine's unassuming elegance stood out in a room thick with pretension. She seemed genuinely curious about people, not just their status. After a brief interview, he asked if he could take her to dinner. They exchanged numbers, each pretending an air of casualness neither truly felt. When Charles looked at Catherine, he saw a world untouched by cynicism. She was the real thing, warm and gentle, in a way that made him feel appreciated beyond his bank account. In turn, Catherine saw in Charles a strength and sophistication she found dazzling. She noted, in her diary that evening, how she felt both safe and anxious around him, like stepping onto a thrilling new path. Within months, they were an official couple, gracing the society pages. Charles whisked Catherine off to private dinners, charity auctions, and weekend getaways in the Hamptons. She wrote pages in her diary about how the hush of the ocean at dusk, set against the brilliance of the moonlit water, convinced her that her destiny lay with this enigmatic businessman. Yet she also recorded doubts. He was so driven, so sometimes aloof. Did he have room in his life for love? Catherine's parents liked Charles, albeit cautiously. Margaret Clark worried her daughter's gentle nature might be overwhelmed by the Harrington family's unrelenting expectations. But no one could deny that Catherine glowed in Charles's presence, her eyes flickering with newfound excitement about the future. Her father teased that no prospective husband could pass muster with him unless he read Dickens as diligently as she did. Oh, and Charles laughingly promised to try. No one at that time, not even Catherine, who was so adept at reading other people, could foresee the dark roads their union would travel. The wedding was an elaborate affair held at the Harrington estate, a sprawling property in Connecticut known for its manicured gardens and shimmering lake. Dignitaries, business moguls, and high society elites in designer gowns mingled with Catherine's more modest circle of friends and family. The press coverage was intense after all. Charles Harrington was a brand in and of himself, and Catherine a rising star in journalism. Under a flower-laden gazebo, Catherine promised to love Charles in sickness and in health, and he reciprocated with a vow to cherish and protect her all his days. That night, as they danced under twinkling chandeliers, Catherine believed every fairy tale she'd ever read had come to life. Overwhelmed with gratitude, she managed to slip away from the reception, found a quiet bench near the lake, and jotted a quick note in her diary, "I've never been happier or more terrified. I love him with everything I have, but I must protect who I am, my voice. I pray I never lose that." The first year of marriage sparkled with newlywed enthusiasm. They traveled to Europe, attended business summits in Tokyo, and spent lazy Sundays in bed, reading side by side. Catherine joined charitable initiatives and continued to write freelance pieces, though she scaled back to support Charles's hectic schedule. They would host dinner parties where she delighted in playing the gracious hostess, ensuring the conversation flowed and the wine never ran dry. She found herself accepted among the wives of CEOs and ambassadors. They praised her poise and sympathetic ear. Charles's father, Richard, declared that Catherine had class. Yet beneath the surface, subtle differences arose. Charles increasingly brought his work home. He would spend long nights in his study, poring over financial reports. On the nights Catherine coaxed him to relax and watch a movie, he seemed restless. Slowly, the sweet gestures notes left by the coffee maker, spontaneous bouquets, became less frequent. Catherine's diaries began to reflect her growing concern. Charles is slipping away into the haze of deals and power plays. I miss him. I miss us. It was around this time she first noticed a tension in him that hadn't been there before. She chalked it up to the demands of business. After all, Harrington Holdings was expanding rapidly, and every misstep was magnified by the press. Determined to be supportive, Catherine tried to lighten his burdens. She smoothed over business dinners, learned the names of all his key clients, and made sure their households ran seamlessly. If someone had told her then that she would soon be questioning her own sanity, and that her diaries would be the only place she could trust her own thoughts, she might have laughed in disbelief. But life has a way of twisting our paths without warning. They say the presence of new life can either strengthen a marriage or reveal its deepest cracks. For Catherine and Charles, it did both. Catherine's pregnancy was a long-desired blessing for her. She yearned to be a mother, to give a child the sort of love and security she had known. As soon as her doctor confirmed the pregnancy, she raced to Harrington Tower, Charles's headquarters in downtown Manhattan. Brimming with excitement, she rode the private elevator up to his executive floor, imagining the look on his face when she announced the news. Charles was in the middle of a deal negotiation. The moment Catherine saw him behind his glass-walled office, his brow creased in concentration. As he spoke quietly with an associate, she hesitated. She worried he might dismiss the news as just one more issue to handle. Instead, she took a breath and knocked gently. He glanced up, an impatient flicker in his eyes. Yet when she told him, tears glimmering in her own, that they were expecting a child, Charles broke into a grin. For a moment, Catherine saw a softness reminiscent of their early days. He wrapped her in a firm embrace, promising he would make more time for family. But business rarely waits. Over the following weeks, Catherine's morning sickness began in earnest. She found comfort in reading and journaling whenever the nausea abated. She fantasized about their unborn child, writing pages in her diary about baby names and nursery decorations. But as her body changed, her husband grew more distant, consumed by Harrington Holdings' expansion into European tech markets. A kernel of fear took hold in her mind. Would Charles ever slow down for his child? Nevertheless, Catherine tried to maintain her positivity. She had always believed in the power of optimism and genuine affection, believing that even the busiest, most guarded hearts could be reached with love. Yet a new face emerged in their social circle, a name that would soon be scrawled with bitterness across the pages of Catherine's diaries: Victoria Green. Victoria Green was the kind of woman who commanded attention. She had been a rising star in the European tech sector before relocating to New York to head the Digital Futures Initiative at Harrington Holdings. Renowned for her intelligence and ambition, Victoria soon became Charles's right hand in negotiating a series of crucial acquisitions. Her physical appearance turned heads, tall, sleek, and effortlessly stylish. But what truly set her apart was her keen business acumen. She spoke the language of deals and strategy with unwavering confidence. Catherine first heard mention of Victoria from a casual conversation with Charles over dinner. He described her as sharp and a key asset to our team. Catherine, curious and wanting to take an interest in her husband's work, suggested they invite Victoria to one of their dinner parties. Charles seemed hesitant but ultimately agreed. When Victoria arrived at the Harrington penthouse, Catherine's immediate impression was of a woman thoroughly comfortable in high-powered circles. Victoria admired the penthouse's architecture, nodding respectfully at Charles's curated art collection. She turned to Catherine with a practiced smile, inquiring politely about her pregnancy. Catherine's polite response was overshadowed by the distinct dynamic between Charles and Victoria, a quiet synergy that few business pairs develop so quickly. Throughout that evening, Catherine noticed how Charles's eyes lingered on Victoria, how Victoria's laughter came swiftly whenever Charles made a joke. She felt a subtle chill, an undercurrent of tension, like a distant thundercloud creeping across an otherwise sunny sky. Still, Catherine told herself she was overthinking. She was pregnant and more emotional than usual. In the subsequent weeks, Catherine found herself alone in the penthouse more often. Charles began working late nights with Victoria, traveling to conferences in Berlin and Stockholm to secure major deals for Harrington Holdings. Catherine's questions about these trips were always met with dismissive, hurried answers. He insisted everything was for their future, so the baby would want for nothing. Yet the distance between them grew more pronounced. One sleepless night, Catherine flicked on the bedroom lamp and retrieved her diary. She could not dismiss her gnawing suspicions. She'd once read that a pregnant woman's intuition sharpens in ways she can't fully explain. Tapping her pen against the paper, she wondered whether she dared put her fears into words. "I feel uneasy about Charles and Victoria. He keeps saying I'm overreacting, that I need to focus on my health and the baby, but I sense a change in him, an easiness when he speaks her name. Am I foolish, or just seeing the truth?" Writing it made her feel a bit calmer. She reminded herself that suspicion was a poison. It could corrode her marriage if it wasn't grounded in fact. Still, she couldn't help the flood of worry that threatened to drown her every night. The pregnancy advanced, and the baby seemed healthy at every checkup. Catherine loved feeling the gentle flutter of kicks, the joyful reminder that she was never truly alone. She documented each milestone in her diary: the day she first felt the baby move, the day she learned the baby was a boy, and even the wave of love that washed over her as she imagined holding her son for the first time. Meanwhile, Charles's involvement in her prenatal journey waned. Though he attended a few appointments early on, he often cancelled at the last minute. When confronted, he countered that Harrington Holdings was on the brink of a monumental merger. Catherine felt guilt for resenting his ambition, but she couldn't shake the sadness over facing so many changes by herself. At 6 months pregnant, Catherine hosted a baby shower. It was a refined, elegant affair in the penthouse's grand living room, with pastel-colored decorations and a lavish array of finger foods. Society ladies, including wives of Charles's colleagues and old Georgetown friends, attended. Victoria showed up as well, looking radiant in a tailored dress. She offered Catherine a pair of gold baby rattles from an upscale children's boutique. Catherine forced a grateful smile, her eyes flickering to Charles, who seemed oddly proud that Victoria had taken the time to attend. The real blow came that evening, after the guests left, when Catherine discovered Victoria had spent the previous night finalizing documents at a luxury hotel with Charles. She caught sight of a dinner receipt from the Aria Roof Lounge in Charles's jacket pocket. The date and time were suspiciously after business hours. When Catherine confronted him, Charles stated simply, "We needed privacy to discuss the final details, away from distractions. But at a rooftop lounge at midnight?" Catherine asked, her voice trembling. Charles's temper flared, and she found herself on the receiving end of accusations. "Stop being paranoid. You're letting your hormones get the best of you." Then he stormed out, leaving Catherine alone with her tears, confusion, and unborn child. Weeks turned into a pattern. Charles's anger or dismissiveness whenever Catherine raised her concerns left her feeling isolated and uncertain. She wrote in her diary, "Maybe he's right, maybe I'm being irrational. I keep thinking about the happy life we planned. Am I losing grip on reality, or is he slipping away? I'd do anything to keep this family together." Around this time, Catherine noticed subtle changes in how Charles interacted with her in public. He'd gently guide her away from conversations if she began to question him in front of others. He often suggested she was overtired or under stress if she expressed displeasure. His words became laced with a patronizing kindness, always referencing her fragile condition. Each remark chipped away at her confidence. Catherine's nights grew restless. She'd clutch her diary like a talisman, scribbling her doubts and fears in the faint glow of a bedside lamp. She had no idea that these very pages would become her saving grace when the world turned on her. It happened in the 7th month of Catherine's pregnancy, during a particularly stormy weekend. Rain pounded the penthouse windows, lightning illuminating the night sky in flashes of silver. Charles was in the study with Victoria, who had come over allegedly to finalize last-minute negotiations for a major acquisition. Catherine, feeling unwell, tried to get some rest in the master bedroom, yet every loud peal of laughter or low murmur of voices from the study set her nerves on edge. Unable to sleep, she ventured down the hallway, intending to ask Charles for a glass of water. Pausing just outside the study doors, she heard Victoria's voice, low and intimate. "She's more unstable by the day, Charles. We need to secure everything before she causes a scandal." A hush followed, as if both realized the weight of those words. Charles's response was barely audible. "We'll do what we must." Catherine's heart pounded, sweat beading on her forehead despite the cool air. The baby kicked nervously, as if responding to her anxiety. Fear coursed through her veins. She had to steady herself against the wall to keep from collapsing. Tears blurred her vision as she crept back to the bedroom, heartbreak giving way to a fierce, maternal protectiveness. Whatever plan they were hatching, it could not bode well for her or her child. She flipped open her diary, her hands shaking as she wrote, "I heard them tonight. Victoria called me unstable." Charles agreed with her. "They're making plans, but I don't know what. I feel an invisible noose tightening around my life. I must be careful, very careful." Over the next few days, small anomalies started piling up. Catherine discovered her personal belongings, the contact details of her friends, certain documents missing or disorganized. She would find drawers left open in the bedroom with items misplaced. At first, she thought the staff might be tidying, but in the back of her mind, she suspected this was a tactic to rattle her, to make her question her own memory. She tried to speak to Charles, but his eyes glazed over whenever she expressed concern. "You're tired," he'd say. "You need rest. Stop worrying about everything." A few times she tried to ring her parents, but they were on an extended retirement trip in Europe. She left voice messages, but found it impossible to voice her fears fully. "I'm not feeling quite myself. The baby is healthy, though. I'll be fine, don't worry," was all she could manage. She didn't want to alarm them without proof, and the illusions of a perfect marriage still haunted her. Admitting the truth felt like exposing her failings. Desperate for outside counsel, Catherine confided in her longtime friend, Lucy Reynolds, a journalist she'd met at the Washington Post. Meeting Lucy at a coffee shop, she poured out everything: her suspicions of infidelity, the overheard conversation, the missing items. Lucy's eyes widened with alarm, urging Catherine to speak with an attorney. But Catherine felt paralyzed by fear of confrontation. "What if I'm wrong?" she whispered. "Charles could destroy me if he thinks I'm attacking him unjustly." In that moment, Lucy reached across the table and squeezed Catherine's hand. "If you suspect you're in danger, get help. Don't wait for them to strike first." That night, Catherine tried to record her thoughts more systematically in her diary. She outlined times, dates, suspicious remarks. Each entry became more detailed and meticulous, as if preparing a case. For the first time, she sensed that her diary might be the only unbiased witness she had. The blow came on a sunny Friday morning, 2 weeks before Catherine's due date. She awoke to find Charles seated in the living room with an older man who introduced himself as Dr. Andrew Mills, a renowned psychiatrist. Dr. Mills explained gently that he had been called upon to assess Catherine's mental well-being. "Your husband is concerned," the psychiatrist said, an air of fatherly patience in his voice. "He's mentioned that you've been exhibiting signs of acute paranoia and emotional distress. With the baby coming, he wants to ensure you're in the best possible state of mind." Charles stood behind Dr. Mills, hands folded, projecting a concerned stance. His expression seemed to beg Catherine not to cause a scene, as if she were indeed a volatile patient in need of professional care. Outraged, Catherine demanded to know what was happening. Charles's voice was a measured calm, as if addressing a fragile child. "Catherine, I love you, but you've become unpredictable, paranoid about me and Victoria. You're misplacing items. You wake up at night screaming, claiming people are spying on you." She stared at him in disbelief. "I never said people were spying on me. I said, I suspect someone's moving my belongings. And yes, I do believe there's something going on between you and Victoria." Dr. Mills raised an eyebrow. "See? Unfounded accusations and illusions of persecution are often indicative of mental stress." "Let's talk, Catherine." Realizing the trap, Catherine felt an urgent need to protect herself. She refused the assessment, telling Dr. Mills to leave. Charles let out a dramatic sigh and threatened to have her declared mentally unfit if she didn't cooperate. "It's for your own good," he insisted. Trembling with rage and betrayal, Catherine remembered Lucy's warning. They were indeed striking first. She clutched her diary in her hands, as if it were her shield. She refused to be whisked away without a fight, glowering at Charles with silent defiance. In the end, Dr. Mills left, but not without quietly telling Charles that there were plenty of legal avenues if Catherine continued to refuse professional help. That evening, Charles claimed he was staying overnight at the office to finalize urgent matters. The moment he left, Catherine rummaged through the documents in the study. Her heart pounded when she discovered a set of legal papers in one of the locked drawers papers that outlined a petition for involuntary psychiatric commitment with her name on it. Charles had already prepared them, citing her delusional and erratic behavior. Buried deeper in the drawer were references to certain offshore accounts in Victoria Green's name. Catherine's mouth ran dry as she realized the depth of their conspiracy. This wasn't just about an affair. They had plans to secure the Harrington assets in such a way that Catherine would be declared incompetent to manage the finances, effectively shutting her out of any claim to the family fortune. And if they succeeded, they would control the baby's future as well. Panicking, Catherine stashed the evidence in a safe place. She spent hours that night scribbling every detail she had uncovered into her diary, using the neatest handwriting she could muster. She hoped that one day, if needed, it could be read by someone who would believe her. Time was running out. With just days to go until her due date, Catherine had to think quickly. She confided in Lucy, who accompanied her to a small law firm recommended by a friend. The lawyer, Patricia Gaines, listened intently to Catherine's tale of hidden documents, suspicious late-night meetings, and a husband pushing for involuntary psychiatric commitment. Patricia's expression went from mild curiosity to genuine alarm. "I've seen similar tactics among wealthy families," she said, leaning forward, elbows on her desk. "If they can prove you're mentally unstable, you lose all legal standing. They can control your medical decisions, finances, everything." Catherine had tears in her eyes. "My child," Patricia nodded sympathetically. "Your child as well, but diaries can be persuasive evidence. Often, they show a consistent pattern of thought, especially if we can prove the timeline of your entries. We'll need more than that, though. Is there any other corroborating evidence?" Catherine mentioned the documents she'd found, referencing Charles's petition for involuntary commitment and the offshore accounts. Patricia's face grew determined. "That's tangible proof of a plot. If we can get that in front of a judge, we might have a case." Still, The risk was immense. Charles, with his wealth and influence, could discredit Catherine. She feared some kind of last-minute move before she gave birth. Patricia advised her to keep her head down while they prepared an emergency legal motion to counter his. Lucy offered Catherine a safe place to stay, away from the penthouse's prying staff and any intimidation from Charles. That night, Catherine fled the penthouse with a single suitcase, pressing a trembling kiss to her diary before sliding it into her bag. She left a note for Charles that read, "I'm staying with a friend until the baby is born. I need peace. Please, let's settle this without harming each other." She doubted he would respect her wish, but she felt a flicker of hope in leaving behind the suffocating environment. In Lucy's modest apartment, Catherine found some relief. She slept in Lucy's guest room, occasionally awakened by nightmares of being forcibly dragged to a mental institution. The baby was due any day, and she tried to stay calm, focusing on her breathing exercises, journaling her hopes that her son would enter the world without fear. Each diary entry was filled with love for her child, interspersed with a steely resolve to fight for her own sanity. Their respite was short-lived. 3 days later, Charles's lawyers filed a motion claiming Catherine was a danger to herself and her unborn child. They requested immediate psychiatric intervention. Patricia sprang into action, filing a counter-motion with the evidence Catherine had gathered. A hearing was scheduled. The day of the hearing, the air outside the New York County Courthouse felt unseasonably cold for late spring. Catherine, heavily pregnant, arrived with Patricia and Lucy by her side. Media cameras clicked, capturing the Harrington scandal, as it was now being dubbed. Charles arrived separately, accompanied by a team of high-powered attorneys and, notably, Victoria Green, who wore a conservative black suit and a look of composed concern. Inside the courtroom, Catherine took a seat at the defendant's table. She clutched her diary in her lap, her heart thumping so loudly she thought everyone could hear it. Judge Harriet Winston, a firm but fair jurist, known for her no-nonsense demeanor, presided over the proceedings. She eyed both parties with equal skepticism, demanding order from the moment she took the bench. Charles's lead attorney, a silver-haired man named Gregory Lyons, presented a dramatic opening statement. He described Catherine as suffering from delusions, citing alleged episodes of paranoia and mania during her pregnancy. Victoria was listed as a witness, presumably ready to confirm Catherine's erratic behavior. Charles sat stoically, nodding occasionally, as the attorney painted Catherine as a troubled woman whose condition warranted professional care. Patricia's rebuttal was calm but forceful. She provided copies of the documents Catherine had discovered, Charles's petition for involuntary commitment, dated weeks before any official evaluation, the suspicious offshore accounts, and records of Charles's late-night hotel rendezvous with Victoria. She argued that these strongly suggested a conspiracy to declare Catherine mentally unfit in order to secure complete control over Harrington Holdings. She then introduced Catherine's diary as a chronicle of her true emotional state over time. Judge Winston leaned forward with interest. "You have a diary spanning how long?" Catherine managed to speak, though her voice trembled. "I've written in diaries my entire life, Your Honor. I have many volumes at home, but this one covers from before I got pregnant up until now." Patricia added, "We propose this diary as evidence to demonstrate Catherine's consistent, lucid perspective. It also details her growing concerns about her husband's suspected affair and his moves against her." Gregory Lyons objected on the grounds that diaries are subjective, easily manipulated, and not necessarily factual. Patricia countered by pointing out that the entries were dated, many including references to events that could be corroborated. Judge Winston allowed the diary to be introduced, stating she would read the relevant entries in private chambers if necessary. Despite the swirling tension, Catherine felt a surge of relief. Her diary, the one place she had poured her soul, was finally in a position to speak for her. She glanced at Charles, who averted his eyes. The hearing continued with witness testimonies. Victoria took the stand, feigning concern. She insisted that Catherine had confronted her late at night on several occasions, screaming accusations. Patricia produced a record showing that Catherine was at obstetric checkups during some of those alleged confrontations. This discrepancy cast doubt on Victoria's credibility. Dr. Mills then testified, but his voice dripped with condescension. "Catherine refused to see me," he said. "A sane person would be eager for professional help if they felt threatened." Patricia hammered back. "Isn't it true that you were brought in at Charles Harrington's sole request, and you never performed a neutral assessment?" Dr. Mills fumbled, admitting that he had not done a single formal one-on-one session with Catherine. In the midst of these revelations, Catherine's breathing grew labored. She clutched her belly, her baby was stirring, possibly responding to her stress. She prayed the child would hold off just a bit longer, at least until the judge could make a ruling. Finally, Judge Winston called a recess, taking the diary into her chambers to read select passages. The entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Charles's camp appeared nervous. Patricia placed a reassuring hand on Catherine's shoulder. The recess stretched on longer than expected, fueling speculation among the press buzzing in the halls. Lucy brought Catherine a glass of water, helping her calm down. Catherine stared at the clock, her mind cycling through every possible outcome. Would the judge interpret her written entries as paranoid rambles or as truthful and lucid accounts? When Judge Winston returned, her face wore a mix of sternness and empathy. She asked Charles to approach the bench, accompanied by his attorneys. Catherine and Patricia were also summoned forward. Clearing her throat, the judge spoke in a measured tone. "I have read substantial portions of Miss S. Harrington's diary. They paint a portrait of a woman who is anxious, yes, understandably, given her pregnancy and the emotional distance she perceived in her husband, but there is nothing in these writings that suggests psychosis or any mental disorder. Rather, the first see meticulous records of conversations and events that align with the evidence presented by Miss Gaines." She fixed Charles with a piercing stare. "Mr. Harrington, it appears you initiated steps to have your wife declared incompetent before any formal evaluations or serious incidents occurred. This calls into question the legitimacy of your claim regarding her mental health. Furthermore, the financial documents involving Miss Green raise concerns about your motives." Across the courtroom, a ripple of shock passed through observers. Charles's expression hardened, but he didn't speak. Victoria's face was ashen, her eyes flickering nervously. Judge Winston then issued her decision. Catherine was not to be deemed mentally unfit. The petition to have her placed under involuntary psychiatric care was denied in full. Additionally, the judge indicated that Catherine had grounds to pursue a more comprehensive legal action against Charles, given the suspicious nature of his attempts to institutionalize her. She warned Charles and Victoria that any further harassment or intimidation would be met with legal consequences. Catherine's hands shook as relief washed over her. She was free from the immediate threat of forced psychiatric commitment. More importantly, she was vindicated in the eyes of the court. Her diary had saved her, shining a light on the truth no amount of money or influence could fully eclipse. As the gavel came down, the tension seemed to snap. Reporters rushed forward shouting questions. Patricia whisked Catherine out of the courtroom. They navigated the throng of cameras, Lucy close behind, ensuring Catherine stayed safe. Outside, Catherine felt the sun on her face, and for the first time in weeks, she took a deep breath without feeling trapped. It was over, or so she thought. Late that same night, as Catherine rested in Lucy's apartment, a sharp pain cut through her belly. At first, she dismissed it as lingering stress from the hearing, but the pains came in waves, each more intense than the last. Alarmed, Lucy helped her into a cab, and they rushed to the hospital. Patricia arrived shortly thereafter, holding Catherine's hand as medical staff prepped her for what appeared to be early labor. Catherine's body was exhausted from weeks of emotional turmoil, but her resolve was unshakable. She focused on each breath, determined to bring her son into the world safely. Over several agonizing hours, she cried out in pain, gripping Lucy's and Patricia's hands in alternating desperation. An obstetrician, Dr. Martinez, monitored the labor, encouraging Catherine to stay calm. In the end, as dawn broke through the hospital window, a shrill cry announced the arrival of a healthy baby boy. Catherine's arms trembled when she first held him. She gazed into tiny, blinking eyes, feeling a tidal wave of love and gratitude. Lucy shed tears of relief, and Patricia murmured a quiet prayer of thanks. For Catherine, that moment eclipsed every betrayal and heartbreak she had endured. Here was a life she would protect at all costs. A day later, Charles appeared at the hospital, flanked by his attorneys. Catherine, cradling her newborn, felt her heart tighten. He approached gingerly, wanting to see his son. For an instant, Catherine glimpsed a flicker of what looked like genuine emotion in his eyes. Yet the memory of all he had put her through remained. She allowed him to hold the baby under the watchful gaze of her lawyer, but she made it clear that she was pursuing legal separation. Charles tried to protest, offering apologies and half-hearted explanations. He claimed that Victoria had manipulated him, that he truly loved Catherine and wanted their family intact. Catherine listened, tears stinging her eyes. But she had read enough in her diaries, remembered enough broken promises and cruel words to know that reconciliation was impossible under the current circumstances. So began the next chapter in Catherine's life, a single mother forging her own path away from the Harrington empire. Yet the legal battles were far from over. Custody, financial arrangements, potential lawsuits, these loomed ahead. Still, Catherine felt a sense of quiet power. She had her diary and her truth. That, she realized, was more valuable than any check or lofty apology Charles could offer. In the weeks following the birth, Charles made repeated attempts to contact Catherine, urging her to come home. He fired Dr. Mills and distanced himself from Victoria publicly, though rumors swirled that the two were still collaborating on Harrington business ventures. Tabloids ran headlines like "Harrington's wife beats mental fitness claim" and "Love triangle at the top." Despite Charles's insistence that they could mend their marriage, Catherine refused to entertain the notion. She stayed at Lucy's apartment temporarily, grateful for her friend's unwavering support. Whenever the baby cried at night, Catherine nursed him, exhaustion battling pure love. She caught glimpses of her old self in the mirror, resilient, unbroken. She kept journaling, describing the joys and challenges of new motherhood. A new kind of strength blossomed in her. Motherhood brought clarity, a sense that no matter how wealthy or powerful Charles was, she and her baby deserved a life free from manipulation. Meanwhile, Patricia worked diligently. She filed a motion for legal separation, citing emotional abuse and malicious intent. Catherine read through the lengthy paperwork, her eyes burning with tears at the retelling of Charles's elaborate scheme. But each page was a step closer to reclaiming her autonomy. She refused to be a silent victim in a gilded cage. Victoria Green, for her part, tried to salvage her career. She resigned from Harrington Holdings amidst the scandal, only to re-emerge at a competitor's firm. Rumors whispered that she and Charles still maintained contact, though no one could confirm. Catherine sometimes wondered how two people could operate with such cunning and little remorse. But she eventually decided that giving them any mental energy was a waste of her precious time. Her priority was her son. The diaries continued to serve as Catherine's bastion of truth. She filled page after page with the story of her child's first weeks, his feeding habits, his favorite lullabies, the adorable way he grasped her finger. Surrounded by Lucy and Patricia's encouragement, Catherine felt more hopeful about the future than she had in months. Still, the biggest hurdle remained: the formal custody hearing. Charles wanted partial custody, and he had the resources to mount a formidable case. Catherine knew that every scrap of evidence would be scrutinized again, the diaries, the documents, and her emotional state as a new mother. She resolved to remain steadfast and poised. If the diaries had saved her once, they could do so again. The custody hearing took place in the same courthouse, but this time there was a new judge presiding, Judge Elizabeth Morley, known for her thoroughness in family law. Patricia arrived early, meticulously organizing the evidence. Charles and his legal team followed, exuding confidence. The baby stayed with Lucy outside the courtroom to spare him the media frenzy. Charles attempted to argue that Catherine's postpartum condition might impede her ability to care for the child. He brought in a pediatric psychologist who had never actually met Catherine, claiming an unstable environment could harm the baby's development. Patricia effortlessly dismantled the psychologist's testimony by pointing out the lack of direct evaluation and the known biases of professionals hired for litigation purposes. Next, Charles himself took the stand. He expressed regret over the earlier unfortunate misunderstanding regarding Catherine's mental fitness, saying it arose out of genuine concern. Patricia wasted no time cross-examining him about the documentation that showed he had planned to file for Catherine's involuntary commitment before any official psychiatric evaluation. Charles tried to dodge the questions, but the record was undeniable. Judge Morley's face grew stern. It was evident she disapproved of such manipulative tactics. When it was Catherine's turn, she spoke softly but confidently. She described the fear she endured when Charles threatened her freedom by labeling her mentally unfit, the heartbreak of discovering his ongoing involvement with Victoria, and her commitment to providing a stable, loving home for her son. She read a small excerpt from her diary, an entry detailing her excitement about motherhood and her sadness over Charles's absence. The raw sincerity in her words moved several observers to tears. Judge Morley then called Lucy to testify about Catherine's state of mind during the weeks before and after giving birth. Lucy painted a portrait of a woman under siege, doing her utmost to protect her child. The contrast between Catherine's loyalty and Charles's underhanded tactics could not have been more stark. In the end, the judge issued a carefully considered ruling. Catherine was granted primary custody of their son, with Charles allowed supervised visitation until he could demonstrate good faith efforts to mend his ways. The judge also admonished Charles, warning that any future attempts to undermine Catherine's parental rights through deceitful strategies would result in severe legal repercussions. Catherine felt a sense of catharsis wash over her. While the road ahead might still have challenges, financial disputes, co-parenting tensions, she had safeguarded her son's future. As she left the courtroom, cameras flashed once more, but Catherine shielded her child from the public glare. She whispered in his ear, "We're free now." And though he was too young to understand, she believed he felt the relief in her voice. In the months that followed, Catherine settled into a small but cozy townhouse in a quiet neighborhood just outside the city. Patricia helped finalize the separation agreement, ensuring Catherine had the financial support needed to provide for her son. Charles made a few attempts at reconciliation, but Catherine remained firm. He eventually focused on running Harrington Holdings, a man weighed down by the knowledge of what he had nearly done. Victoria Green faded from the public eye, though Catherine occasionally heard rumors. Some said Victoria was blacklisted from certain circles. Others claimed she thrived at her new firm. Catherine chose to leave that chapter behind. She had no desire to carry bitterness. Her love for her child took precedence over all else. Lucy continued to be a steadfast friend. She often visited Catherine's townhouse for coffee, marveling at the baby's growth. Together, they reflected on the harrowing journey Catherine had undertaken, how her trust was shattered, how her diary became her voice, and how, Despite the anguish, she emerged stronger. Catherine mulled over the possibility of writing a memoir or an investigative piece about the misuse of psychiatric claims in high society divorces. But she wasn't quite ready to revisit that pain in such a public way. Not yet. Each morning, Catherine greeted the sunrise with her son in her arms, the hush of dawn wrapping them in gentle light. She would scribble a few lines in her diary now, a testament not to fear, but to resilience and rebirth. There was solace in those pages, a reminder that even when the world seemed to conspire against her, she had found her own truth and clung to it. She refused to see herself as a victim. She was a survivor. In time, Catherine returned to journalism, penning human interest stories that examined the resilience of the human spirit. She developed a special focus on domestic abuse and mental health manipulation, hoping her work could help others facing similar betrayals. Though she kept her personal history private, her empathy shone through every article. She received letters from readers who felt she understood their pain in a way few others could. A year passed. Catherine's son celebrated his first birthday with a small gathering of loved ones. The townhouse was decorated in bright, cheerful colors, and the baby squealed in delight at the balloons Lucy had brought. Patricia arrived with a thoughtful gift, a leather-bound journal embossed with the baby's initials, to encourage Catherine to chronicle his life from day one. Midway through the party, Catherine noticed a folder in Patricia's bag. Curious, she inquired, and Patricia revealed that she was finalizing the last piece of the legal puzzle, an official restraining order against any further harassment from Charles or his associates. Just in case, Patricia said, giving Catherine a reassuring smile. Catherine felt a mix of relief and sadness. She had loved Charles once, truly, but that love was overshadowed by what he had tried to do. Catherine excused herself and stepped onto the small backyard patio where the summer breeze blew gently. Gazing at her vibrant garden, she thought about how far she'd come. She felt life blossoming again, no longer overshadowed by wealthy conspiracies or venomous lies. Her boy's laughter drifted from the living room, a gentle reminder that the best chapters of her life still lay ahead. When she returned indoors, she saw her son crawling across the floor, chasing a colorful ball. She joined him, scooping him into her arms. As he giggled, Catherine's eyes glistened with tears. Not tears of pain or regret, but tears of gratitude for the new dawn they had reached. She would continue writing in her diary, but now her entries revolved around growth, hope, and the daily wonders of motherhood. The scars of the past remained, but they no longer dictated her future. In Catherine's world, love and truth had triumphed over greed and betrayal. And she'd make sure her child grew up knowing that no matter how dark the world might seem, a steadfast heart and a faithful pen could light the path to freedom. Catherine's battle proves that truth can withstand even the most ruthless schemes when it's revealed at the right time, in the right place, like a diary read by a discerning judge. Her story reminds us to never underestimate the power of documenting our thoughts, standing firm in our convictions and fighting for what we know is right. Now, if you found yourself moved by Catherine's journey from betrayal and heartbreak to healing and empowerment, help share her story far and wide. Leave a comment about the moment you found the most shocking or inspiring. Hit that like button if you believe in the triumph of truth over deceit. And don't forget to subscribe so you can stay connected as we explore more tales of resilience, courage, and the strength that lies within us all. This is just one story, and countless more remain waiting to be told.